The storm hit Cedar Creek the same afternoon the deputy rode out to Juniper Ranch with questions Willa Sinclair could not afford to answer. She stood on the porch watching Micah Turner dismount, rain already darkening the shoulders of his duster, and felt the ledger book grow heavy in her hands. She knew what he wanted. Everyone in town knew the bank examiner had died 3 weeks ago on the road to Silver Falls, his throat cut and his saddlebags emptied. What no one knew was that Willa had been riding home late from the Johnsons' place that night and had seen the 2 men standing over the body in the moonlight. What no one knew was that one of those men wore a marshal's badge. And what absolutely no one could know was that the new deputy had been there too, half hidden in the cottonwoods, watching the same murder Willa had witnessed before she turned her mare and rode hard for home. She had seen Micah Turner's face in the moonlight, just as clearly as he must have seen hers. Now he was here, and the storm was closing in, and Willa had exactly 4 days before the bank foreclosed on Juniper Ranch. She set the ledger on the porch rail. Micah Turner climbed the steps slowly, rain dripping from his hat brim, his hand resting easy on his gun belt in a way that was either threat or habit. Up close his eyes were gray, tired, and far too careful. Willa lifted her chin. "You are a long way from town, deputy." Micah stopped 2 steps below her, rain already soaking his shirt where the duster had blown open. "I came to talk about the examiner." Willa's heartbeat kicked hard against her ribs. "I do not know anything about that." Micah's mouth tightened, something that might have been frustration or warning. "Miss Sinclair, lying to me is dangerous. Lying to Marshal Garrett is fatal." A gust of wind tore across the yard, slamming the barn door and driving rain sideways across the porch. Willa pulled her shawl tight. "Then maybe you should not have come." She turned toward the door, but Micah was faster. He caught her wrist, his grip firm but not cruel, and Willa went still. His hand was warm, calloused, steady. She looked down at his fingers circling her wrist, and then up into his face. Micah's expression had shifted, something raw flickering behind the caution. "I know you were there," he said quietly. "I know you saw what I saw. And I know Garrett thinks one of us talked to that examiner before he died." Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the porch boards. Willa pulled her wrist free. "If you are here to threaten me, deputy, you can ride back to town and tell your marshal I do not scare easy." Micah shook his head slowly, rain streaming off his hat. "I am not here for Garrett. I am here because you are in danger, and you do not even know it." Another gust hit, and the sky opened in earnest. Rain pounded the roof, turned the yard to mud in seconds, drowned out everything but the roar of water. Willa looked past Micah at the curtain of rain and made a choice she would regret or cling to for the rest of her life. "Get inside before you drown." Micah followed her into the small ranch office, water pooling under his boots, duster dripping on the worn floorboards. Willa shut the door and leaned against it, her pulse hammering. The office smelled like old paper, leather, and the faint ghost of her father's pipe tobacco. She had kept the books here for 3 years, ever since the fever took him, and left her with a failing ranch and a brother too young to run it. Now the ledgers were full of red ink, the mortgage was overdue, and the one man who might have helped her was dead on a dark road with his throat cut. Willa crossed to the desk, struck a match, and lit the lantern. Warm light filled the small room, throwing Micah's shadow long against the wall. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his damp hair, and met her eyes. "I am going to tell you the truth, Miss Sinclair, and then you are going to decide whether you trust me." Willa set the match down carefully. "I do not trust anyone who works for Garrett." Micah set his hat on the chair, his movements deliberate. "Smart. Garrett is dirty, Miss Sinclair. The bank examiner found proof that he has been skimming territorial funds and covering it with false reports. That examiner was riding to Silver Falls to file charges. He never made it." Willa's throat tightened. "You were there." Micah nodded slowly. "I was tracking 2 men Garrett sent to intercept him. I was too late." He met her gaze, and Willa saw something in his face she had not expected. Grief. Old, buried, but still sharp. "I have been working for the Territorial Marshal's office for 2 years, undercover, trying to gather evidence against Garrett. The examiner's death was my failure." Willa pressed her hands flat on the desk to stop them shaking. "Then why are you still wearing his badge?" "Because if I run, he will know I am the leak, and he will kill every witness who might have seen anything that night. That means you." Thunder rolled overhead, and the lantern flickered. Willa stared at Micah Turner and tried to see past the deputy's star to the man underneath. "If you are telling the truth, why come to me? Why not just leave town and let the territorial office handle it?" Micah leaned forward, bracing his hands on the desk across from hers, close enough that Willa could see the faint scar along his jaw, the exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Because Garrett knows someone saw that murder, and he is tearing this town apart looking for them. Because your ranch is 4 days from foreclosure, and the bank president is Garrett's cousin. Because if Garrett finds out you were on that road, he will make sure you lose everything before he kills you, and no one will ask questions about a woman who could not pay her debts." Willa's breath caught. "You think he knows it was me. I think he suspects, and I think your foreclosure deadline is not an accident." Outside, the wind howled, driving rain against the walls hard enough to make the whole house shudder. Willa straightened, her mind racing. "If Garrett wants me silenced, coming here puts you at risk too." Micah's mouth curved in something too bitter to be a smile. "I have been at risk since the day I pinned on this badge and swore to bring him down. The difference is, I chose it. You did not." Willa looked down at the ledgers, at the columns of numbers that no longer added up to survival, at the past due notices she had been hiding from her brother. She thought about her father's grave on the hill, about the ranch hands she had let go one by one, about the quiet, desperate hope that maybe she could hold on just a little longer. Then she looked up at Micah Turner, at the man who had ridden into a storm to warn a stranger, and made the second choice that would change everything. "What do you need from me?" Micah straightened, his shoulders losing some of their tension. "I need you to testify. The Territorial Marshal is sending an investigator to Cedar Creek, but he will not move without a witness. If you come forward, I can protect you. We can stop Garrett before he destroys anyone else." Willa shook her head slowly. "If I testify, I lose the ranch. Garrett will make sure of that even if you arrest him. And if he walks, I am dead." Micah's jaw tightened. "If you do not testify, you lose the ranch anyway, and Garrett stays free to kill whoever he wants." Willa met his eyes. "Then I guess we are both trapped, Deputy." The storm battered the house, rain drumming the roof in waves. Micah pushed away from the desk, paced to the window, stared out at the flooded yard. Willa watched the line of his shoulders, the way his hand drifted toward his gun, and then stopped. The weariness in every movement. "How long have you been alone in this?" she asked quietly. Micah glanced back at her, startled. 2 years, maybe longer. Willa nodded. "I know what that feels like." Micah turned fully, studying her face in the lamplight. "Your father." Willa looked away. "The fever took him 3 years ago. My brother was 15. I have been holding this place together with spit and prayer ever since." Micah was quiet for a moment. "That is why you cannot lose it." Willa's throat ached. "It is all I have left of him. All my brother has. If the bank takes it, we have nothing. No home, no income, no future." She forced herself to meet Micah's eyes again. "So you see, Deputy, your justice costs more than I can pay." Micah crossed back to the desk in 3 strides. "What if I could buy you time?" Willa looked up sharply. "What?" Micah leaned on the desk again, urgent now. "The investigator arrives in 6 days. If I can delay your foreclosure until then, and if we bring Garrett down, the territorial office can freeze his assets and investigate every transaction he touched. That includes your loan. If we can prove he manipulated it, the foreclosure gets thrown out." Willa's heart kicked hard. "That is a lot of ifs, Deputy." Micah nodded. "It is. But it is a chance, more than you have right now." Willa stared at him, weighing risk against hope, survival against surrender. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me?" Micah held her gaze, and something shifted in his expression, something unguarded and almost painful. "Because I have watched too many good people get buried by men like Garrett. Because you deserve better than losing everything to a corrupt marshal's cover-up. And because," he hesitated, his voice dropping, "I know what it is like to lose the only home you have ever known." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Willa searched his face and saw the truth there, saw the old wound he carried, saw the man underneath the badge. "What did you lose?" Micah looked away, his jaw working. "A farm in Missouri. My family. The war took my father and brother. Reconstruction took everything else. I came west with nothing but a horse and a gun, and I swore I would never let another man with power and no conscience destroy people who could not fight back." Willa's chest tightened. "So this is personal for you too." Micah met her eyes again. "Everything I do is personal, Miss Sinclair. I just hide it better than most." Thunder cracked so close the walls shook, and the lantern guttered. Willa reached out instinctively to steady it, and her hand brushed Micah's on the desk. They both froze. His hand was warm, scarred across the knuckles, steady. Willa's pulse jumped. She pulled back, but not quickly. Micah's gaze dropped to where their hands had touched, then lifted to her face. "I will find a way to stop that foreclosure. You have my word." Willa swallowed hard. "Your word and 4 days, Deputy. That is not much." Micah straightened, his mouth setting in a determined line. "Then we better not waste them." He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket, set it on the desk. "This is a writ I can file claiming the ranch as material evidence in a territorial investigation. It will not hold forever, but it will buy you a week, maybe two. Willa stared at the paper. You already had this ready. Micah's expression was unreadable. I came prepared to give you options, Miss Sinclair. The question is whether you trust me enough to take them. Willa picked up the writ, scanned the official language, felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If I let you file this, everyone will know I am involved. Garrett will know. Micah nodded slowly. He will suspect. But suspicion is not proof, and I will make sure he thinks I am the one who saw the murder, not you. I will draw his attention away from you. Willa looked up sharply. That means putting yourself in his sights. Micah's smile was brief and cold. I have been in his sights since the day I took this assignment. At least now, I will be doing something about it. Willa set the writ down, her mind racing through consequences and costs. If this works, if we stop Garrett and save the ranch, what happens after? Micah's expression softened just slightly. You keep your home. Your brother gets a future. And I finish what I came here to do. Willa heard what he did not say, and then you leave. Micah did not deny it. I am not the staying kind, Miss Sinclair. I have not been for a long time. The honesty hurt more than it should have. Willa nodded slowly. At least you are not lying about it. She picked up the writ again, held it, felt the crossroads sharp and clear. All right, deputy. File your writ. Buy me time, and I will testify when your investigator comes. But if this goes wrong, if Garrett wins, I will have lost everything for nothing. Micah met her eyes, and his voice was steady as stone. If this goes wrong, Miss Sinclair, you will not be the only one who loses everything. That is a promise. Willa believed him. She held out her hand. Then we have a deal. Micah took her hand, his grip warm and firm. And for a moment they stood there in the lamplight, with the storm raging outside, and a fragile alliance settling into place between them. Then Micah released her hand, picked up the writ, folded it carefully back into his vest. I will file this first thing in the morning. Stay close to the ranch until I get word to you. Do not go into town alone, and do not talk to anyone about what you saw that night. Willa nodded. What will you tell Garrett? That I am investigating irregularities in the bank examiner's route, and the ranch happened to be on it. He will not like it, but he cannot stop a territorial writ without revealing his hand. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of what she had just agreed to settling cold and real in her chest. What if he does not wait for proof? What if he just comes after me anyway? Micah's hand drifted to his gun, an unconscious protective gesture. Then I will be here first. Willa met his eyes, saw the promise there, and felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. Warmth, hope, trust she could not afford. You barely know me, deputy. Why would you risk your life for mine? Micah was silent for a long moment, rain hammering the roof, wind howling through the gaps in the old walls. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough. Because I have spent 2 years watching Garrett destroy people, and I could not stop him because I did not have proof. Because that bank examiner died alone on a dark road, and I was too late to save him. Because you are standing here trying to hold your life together with nothing but grit and stubbornness. And I will be damned if I let Garrett take that from you too. He paused, his gaze holding hers. And maybe because I know what it is like to be alone in a fight you cannot win. And I do not want that for you. Willa's throat ached. She wanted to say something, to thank him, or warn him, or tell him to leave before he got himself killed for a woman he barely knew. Instead, she whispered, "I am scared, Deputy." Micah stepped closer, just one step, but it closed the space between them to almost nothing. His voice was quiet, steady, certain. "I know. So am I. But scared does not mean helpless. We are going to fight, and we are going to win. And when this is over, you will still have your ranch. That is the deal." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice. Micah picked up his hat, settled it on his head. "I should go before the yard turns into a lake." Willa followed him to the door. Micah paused on the threshold, rain pouring off the porch roof in a curtain. He turned back, his face half in shadow, half in lantern light. "One more thing, Miss Sinclair. If Garrett sends anyone out here, anyone at all, you get your brother, and you ride straight to the church. Reverend Matthews is a good man. He will keep you safe until I can get there." Willa nodded. Understood. Micah held her gaze for a heartbeat longer, something unspoken passing between them. And then he stepped into the storm. Willa watched him mount his horse, watched him ride out into the rain and the dark, and did not close the door until he disappeared completely. Then she leaned against the frame, her legs shaking, and let herself feel the terror and the hope all at once. She had just bet everything on a man she did not know, a plan that might fail, and a justice system that had never worked for people like her. But for the first time in 3 years, she was not fighting alone. That had to count for something. The storm raged on. Willa locked the door, returned to the desk, and pulled out the ledgers. If she had a week, maybe 2, she would use every minute to find another way to save the ranch, just in case the deputy's promise was not enough. The next morning broke clear and cold. The storm scrubbed away to blue sky and mud. Willa rode into Cedar Creek with her brother Ethan beside her, the wagon loaded with eggs and late-season squash to sell at the general store. Ethan was 18 now, tall and lean, with their father's dark eyes and a cautious optimism Willa envied. He talked about the storm damage, about fixing the barn roof, about whether they could afford another horse come spring. Willa let him talk, and did not mention foreclosure or murder or the deputy who had promised to save them. When they reached the general store, Ethan jumped down to unload the wagon. Willa climbed down slower, scanning the street. Cedar Creek was small, dusty, ordinary. False front buildings lined the main road. The church steeple rose white against the blue. Horses stood hip-shot at the hitching rails. It looked like every other frontier town Willa had ever seen, except somewhere in these quiet streets was a man who had killed to protect his secrets, and would kill again to keep them buried. Willa shivered despite the sunshine. Ethan glanced over. "You all right?" Willa forced a smile. "Just tired. Long night with the storm." Ethan nodded, already turning back to the crates. Willa took a breath and headed into the store. Inside, Mrs. Kowalski weighed the eggs and squash, tallying prices in her neat, cramped hand. She was a round, practical woman who had run the store for 20 years and knew every piece of gossip in Cedar Creek before it happened. She glanced up at Willa with sharp, kind eyes. Heard the deputy rode out to your place yesterday. Willa kept her face neutral. He was checking on storm damage. Lost part of a fence line. Mrs. Kowalski made a non-committal sound. Funny. Garrett's been asking around about who was on the roads the night that Bankfellow died. Says he is looking for witnesses. Willa's pulse kicked, but she kept her voice even. I would not know anything about that. I keep to the ranch most evenings. Mrs. Kowalski handed over the payment, coins clinking into Willa's palm. Just be careful, dear. Garrett is not a man to cross, and that new deputy is trouble no matter how nice he looks. Willa met the older woman's gaze. I am always careful, Mrs. Kowalski. The store owner nodded, but her eyes were worried. Willa pocketed the coins and stepped back into the sunlight. Ethan was talking to a rancher by the wagon. Willa scanned the street again and froze. Marshall Garrett stood outside the saloon, arms crossed, watching her. He was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with a florid face and cold eyes. He wore his authority like a weapon, and everyone in Cedar Creek knew it. Willa forced herself to nod politely and turned toward the wagon. Garrett's voice stopped her. Miss Sinclair, a word. Willa's stomach dropped. She turned slowly. Ethan looked over, frowning. Willa shook her head slightly, and he stayed by the wagon. She crossed the muddy street, her boots squelching, and stopped a careful distance from the marshal. Marshal Garrett, what can I do for you? Garrett's smile did not reach his eyes. I hear Deputy Turner paid you a visit yesterday. Willa kept her expression blank. He was checking storm damage. We lost some fence. Garrett studied her, his gaze heavy and assessing. Funny thing, Turner filed a writ this morning, claiming your ranch is part of a territorial investigation. You know anything about that? Willa's mouth went dry, but she lifted her chin. I do not know what the deputy's business is, Marshal. He did not explain it to me. Garrett stepped closer, and Willa smelled whiskey and sweat. Let me give you some advice, Miss Sinclair. That deputy is not your friend. He is a troublemaker, and he is digging where he should not be digging. If he comes around again, you send him away. You understand? Willa met Garrett's eyes and saw the threat there, saw the calculation. He did not know for certain, but he suspected, and he was testing her. I understand, Marshal. Garrett's smile widened. Good. Hate to see a nice girl like you get mixed up in something ugly. Your daddy was a decent man. I would hate for his daughter to lose everything because she trusted the wrong people. Willa forced herself to nod. I will keep that in mind. Garrett stepped back, still watching her. You do that. And if you remember anything about that Bankfellow, you come to me first. Not Turner. Me. Willa nodded again, not trusting her voice. Garrett turned and walked back toward the saloon, his boots heavy on the boardwalk. Willa stood in the middle of the street, her heart slamming against her ribs, and tried not to shake. Ethan appeared at her elbow, his face tight with worry. What did he want? Willa forced her legs to move, forced herself back toward the wagon. Nothing. Just Marshal business. Ethan did not look convinced, but he climbed up beside her. Willa took the reins, turned the wagon toward home, and did not look back. Garrett was watching. She could feel it like a hand on the back of her neck. The deputy had bought her time, but the clock was ticking faster than she had expected. She found Micah waiting on her porch when she got home. He was leaning against the rail, hat tipped low, his horse tied to the post. Ethan gave him a long, suspicious look. "I will see to the team," he said, and led the wagon toward the barn. Willa climbed the steps slowly, her pulse still ragged from the encounter in town. "Garrett knows." Micah straightened, his face grim. "I figured he would." "What did he say?" Willa told him, word for word. Micah's jaw tightened. "He is warning you off, testing to see if you spook." Willa wrapped her shawl tighter. "I am spooked, Deputy. He is not a fool, and I am not a good liar." Micah studied her, then pushed away from the rail. "You did fine. You did not confirm anything, and you did not run. That is all you need to do. Stay calm, stay quiet. Let me handle Garrett." Willa laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You make it sound easy." Micah's expression softened. "It is not. But you are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. That counts for more than you know." Willa looked up at him, at the steady certainty in his face, and felt that dangerous warmth again. "You keep saying that." Micah met her eyes. "Because it is true." Willa swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Micah glanced toward the barn, then back at Willa. "There is a town social at the church Saturday night. Supper and dancing. Everyone will be there, including Garrett. I need you to come." Willa frowned. "Why?" "Because Garrett is watching you now. And if you hide, he will know something is wrong. You need to act normal. Go to the social. Be seen. Let people think everything is fine." Willa's chest tightened. "You want me to smile and dance while a murderer watches me?" Micah's gaze was steady, sympathetic. "I want you to stay alive long enough for the investigator to arrive. That means not giving Garrett a reason to act." Willa looked away, frustration and fear twisting together. "I am not good at pretending, Deputy." Micah was quiet for a moment. "Then, do not pretend. Just show up. Talk to your neighbors. Eat supper. And if you need someone to stand with you, I will be there." Willa looked back at him sharply. "That will make it worse. If he sees us together, he will know we are working together." Micah's mouth curved slightly. "Let him wonder. Wondering is not the same as knowing. And right now, confusion is our best weapon." Willa shook her head slowly. "You are asking me to walk into the lion's den, Deputy." Micah's smile faded. "I am asking you to trust me one more time. Just until Saturday. After that, the investigator will be 2 days out, and Garrett's time will be running out, not ours." Willa studied Micah's face, the scars and weariness and determination, and made another choice she could not take back. "All right. I will go to the social. But if this gets my brother hurt, I will never forgive you." Micah nodded slowly. "Fair enough. If this gets your brother hurt, I will never forgive myself." The honesty of it steadied something in Willa's chest. She took a breath. "I should go help Ethan with the team." Micah picked up his hat. "I will be in town if you need anything." "And Miss Sinclair?" He paused, his voice dropping. "You did well today. Garrett rattled you, but you did not break. That takes courage." Willa's throat tightened. "I do not feel courageous. I feel terrified." Micah's gaze held hers. Courage is not the absence of fear, Miss Sinclair. It is doing what needs to be done even when you are scared to death. You have more of it than most men I know. He settled his hat, touched the brim in a brief salute, and headed down the steps. Willa watched him mount and ride out, and wondered when she had started believing every word he said. She wondered when she had started wanting him to stay. Saturday came too fast. Willa stood in front of the cracked mirror in her bedroom, trying to decide if the dark green dress was too much or not enough. It was her Sunday best, the one her mother had made before the fever, with a high collar and long sleeves, and a narrow waist that made her feel almost elegant. She had braided her hair and pinned it up, leaving a few soft pieces loose around her face. She looked like a woman going to a social, not a woman about to walk into a trap. Ethan knocked on the door. "You ready?" Willa turned, smoothing her skirt. "Ready as I will ever be." Ethan looked at her, worry creasing his young face. "You have been jumpy all week. What is going on?" Willa forced a smile. "Nothing. Just tired." Ethan did not believe her, but he let it go. They took the wagon into town, the evening air cool and dry, the sky fading to peach and gold. The church was lit up, lanterns glowing in every window, music drifting out into the street. Wagons and horses crowded the yard. Willa's stomach knotted. Ethan helped her down, and they walked toward the doors together. Inside, the church hall was packed, warm, loud with talk and laughter. Long tables were set with food, and a fiddler was tuning up in the corner. Willa scanned the room. She spotted Mrs. Kowalski, the blacksmith's family, the Johnsons, and there, by the far wall, Marshall Garrett, in his best coat, watching the room like a hawk. Willa's pulse jumped. Ethan touched her arm. "You want me to stay close?" Willa shook her head. "Go find your friends. I will be fine." Ethan hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Willa took a breath and stepped deeper into the hall. Mrs. Kowalski appeared at her elbow, smiling. "Willa, dear, you look lovely. Come get some supper before the boys eat it all." Willa let herself be pulled toward the tables, grateful for the distraction. She filled a plate, made small talk, smiled when she was supposed to smile. And all the while, she felt Garrett's gaze on her, heavy and cold. Then a voice spoke low at her shoulder. "Evening, Miss Sinclair." Willa turned, her heart kicking. Micah stood behind her, clean-shaven, hair combed, wearing a dark coat over a pressed shirt instead of his usual duster. He looked different. Younger, almost gentle, but his eyes were sharp, watchful, every inch the deputy. Willa swallowed. Deputy Turner. Micah's mouth curved slightly. "You came." Willa kept her voice low. "You asked me to." Micah nodded. "Thank you." She could see Garrett watching them now, his expression unreadable. Willa set her plate down. This was a mistake. Micah's hand brushed hers, brief and warm. "Trust me." Then louder. "Easy in public," he said. "Miss Sinclair, would you do me the honor of a dance?" Willa stared at him. The fiddler had started playing, and couples were forming on the makeshift floor. Micah held out his hand, his expression calm, steady, daring her to trust him one more time. Willa glanced at Garrett, then back at Micah. She took his hand. Micah led her to the floor, and the crowd shifted to make room. He put one hand on her waist, took her other hand in his, and they began to move. Willa's pulse was a thunder in her ears. She could barely follow the steps. Micah leaned close, his voice a murmur beneath the music. "Breathe, Miss Sinclair. We are just two people dancing. Nothing more." Willa met his eyes. "Garrett is watching." Micah's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Let him. Right now, all anyone sees is a deputy dancing with a pretty woman at a church social. That is the story we want." Willa's cheeks flushed. "Pretty?" Micah's smile was brief, real. "Do not fish for compliments, Miss Sinclair. You know you are." Willa stumbled, and Micah steadied her, pulling her a fraction closer. "Easy. Just follow me." Willa tried to focus on the steps, on the music, on anything but the way Micah's hand felt on her waist, warm and solid and right. "What are we doing, Deputy?" Micah's gaze never left her face. "Right now? Surviving. After that, I will let you know." The music swirled around them, other couples spinning past. Willa let herself be led, let herself fall into the rhythm. For just a moment, she let herself forget Garrett, forget the foreclosure, forget everything but the man holding her, and the way his eyes held hers like a promise. Then, the music ended. Micah released her slowly, his hand lingering on hers for just a breath longer than necessary. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair." Willa nodded, her voice catching. "Deputy." Micah stepped back, tipped his hat, and melted into the crowd. Willa stood on the empty floor, her heart pounding, and felt the weight of every eye in the room. Then, Mrs. Matthews, the Reverend's wife, bustled up with a smile. "Willa, dear, come help me set out the pies." Willa followed gratefully, her legs shaking. She had just danced with Micah Turner in front of the entire town. She had just told Garrett without words that she was not afraid. Except, she was. She was terrified. And the worst part was, she could still feel Micah's hand on her waist, warm and steady, and she wanted it back. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Willa helped with the pies, chatted with neighbors, kept her face calm and her hands busy. Garrett did not approach her, but she felt him watching. Twice she caught him talking to men she did not recognize. Rough-looking men with guns and hard eyes. Hired hands, maybe. Or something worse. When the social finally ended, Willa found Ethan and climbed into the wagon, her whole body aching with tension. Ethan flicked the reins, and they rolled out into the cool night. "Halfway home," he said quietly, "the deputy likes you." Willa's cheeks burned. "Do not be ridiculous." Ethan glanced at her. "I am not blind, Willa. The way he looked at you during that dance, anyone could see it." Willa stared at the dark road ahead. "It does not matter. He is just doing his job." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Maybe. But jobs do not usually look like that. Willa did not answer. She did not know how to explain that Micah Turner was her only chance at saving the ranch, that he was a promise wrapped in danger, that every time he looked at her, she felt something shift inside her chest, something she had thought died with her father and the foreclosure notices. She did not know how to say that she was terrified of losing the ranch, and even more terrified of losing him. They reached home in silence. Ethan put up the team. Willa went inside, lit a lamp, and stood in the quiet house, her heart still racing. Then she heard hoofbeats outside. Fast. Urgent. Willa grabbed the rifle from above the door and stepped onto the porch. A rider was coming hard up the lane, and even in the dark, she recognized the shape of him. Micah. He reined in hard, his horse snorting and blowing. Willa lowered the rifle. What happened? Micah swung down, his face grim in the lamplight spilling from the door. Garrett sent 2 men to your place tonight. I followed them. They were planning to burn your barn and make it look like an accident. Willa's blood went cold. Where are they now? Micah's jaw tightened. Tied up in my office. I arrested them for trespassing and arson conspiracy, but Garrett will have them out by morning. We are out of time, Miss Sinclair. The investigator does not arrive for 2 more days. I do not think we have 2 days. Willa's hands shook on the rifle. What are you saying? Micah stepped closer, his voice urgent. I am saying you and your brother need to leave the ranch tonight. Go to the church. Stay with Reverend Matthews. I will keep watch here and make sure Garrett does not burn you out. Willa shook her head. I am not leaving my home. Micah caught her shoulders, his grip firm. Willa, listen to me. Garrett is desperate. That means he is dangerous. I can protect the ranch. I cannot protect you if you are in it when he comes. Please, trust me. Let me do this. Willa looked up into his face, saw the fear there, the determination, the raw need to keep her safe. Her chest ached. If I leave, he wins. Micah's voice was rough. If you die, he wins everything. Willa's throat closed. She wanted to argue, to fight, to stand her ground. But she saw the truth in Micah's eyes, and she knew he was right. All right. I will get Ethan. We will go. But you better be alive when we get back, Deputy, or I will never forgive you. Micah's hands tightened on her shoulders for just a moment, and then he released her. I will be alive, Miss Sinclair. That is a promise. Willa turned and ran inside, calling for Ethan. He appeared from his room, alarmed. We are leaving. Now. Pack a bag. We are going to the church. Ethan's eyes widened. What? Why? Willa shoved clothes and food into a satchel. Because the deputy says Garrett is coming, and I believe him. Move. Ethan grabbed his coat, his face pale. Micah was already saddling their horses when they came outside. He handed Willa the reins. Ride fast. Do not stop until you reach the church. And do not come back until I send word. Willa met his eyes, her heart pounding. Be careful. Micah's mouth curved in a brief, tight smile. Always. Then he stepped back, and Willa kicked her horse into a gallop. Ethan followed. They rode hard through the dark, the ranch disappearing behind them, and Willa did not let herself look back. They reached the church in half an hour, horses lathered and blowing. Reverend Matthews opened the door in his nightshirt, took one look at their faces, and pulled them inside without questions. His wife made up beds in the small rectory room. Ethan collapsed onto one, exhausted. Willa stood at the window, staring back toward the dark hills, where the ranch lay invisible in the night. Reverend Matthews brought her tea. She is in God's hands now, child. And in the deputy's. Willa's hands tightened on the cup. I should not have left. The Reverend's voice was gentle. The deputy is doing his job. Let him. Willa turned away from the window. What if his job gets him killed? The Reverend smiled sadly. Then he will die doing what he believed was right. That is all any of us can hope for. Willa sank into a chair, the fear and exhaustion crashing over her all at once. She had trusted Micah Turner with her ranch, her brother's future, her life. Now all she could do was wait and pray that he survived the night. She closed her eyes and tried not to imagine what Garrett would do if he found Micah alone at the ranch, waiting for him. She tried not to imagine losing the only man who had stood between her and ruin. She tried not to imagine a future where Micah Turner rode away and she never saw him again. She tried and failed. Dawn came cold and gray. Willa had not slept. She stood on the church steps, wrapped in her shawl, watching the road. Ethan joined her, silent and tense. Reverend Matthews brought coffee. They waited. An hour passed. 2. Then a rider appeared on the eastern road coming fast. Willa's heart leapt. Mike. He rode straight to the church, dismounted, and climbed the steps. His face was drawn, exhausted, but whole. Willa's knees went weak with relief. You are alive. Micah's smile was brief. Told you I would be. What happened? Micah glanced at the Reverend, then back at Willa. Garrett came. Brought 4 men. They tried to fire the barn. I stopped them. Willa's breath caught. You stopped 5 men alone? Micah shrugged. I had the element of surprise. And a good rifle. Willa stared at him, torn between gratitude and fury. You could have been killed. Micah met her eyes. But I was not. And your ranch is still standing. That is what matters. Willa wanted to hit him. She wanted to hug him. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Micah's expression softened. You are welcome. Now get your things. The investigator arrived early. He is at my office right now, and he wants to talk to you. Willa's pulse jumped. Now? Micah nodded. Right now. This is it, Miss Sinclair. Time to finish this. Willa looked at Ethan, at the Reverend, then back at Micah. All right. Let us go. They rode back to town together, the morning sun climbing, the world waking around them. Cedar Creek looked ordinary, quiet, normal. But Willa felt the tension like a wire pulled tight. Micah led them to the small deputy's office behind the marshal's building. Inside, a man in a dark suit stood waiting. He was older, gray-haired, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. Territorial Marshal Investigator Hayes. He gestured to a chair. Miss Sinclair, please sit. Deputy Turner has briefed me on the situation. I need you to tell me, in your own words, everything you saw the night the bank examiner died. Willa sat slowly, her heart pounding. She glanced at Micah. He nodded. She took a breath. And she told the truth, every detail. The moonlight, the 2 men, the marshal's badge, the body, and Micah Turner, hidden in the cottonwoods, watching the same murders she had witnessed. When she finished, Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Your testimony is exactly what we needed. Willa's hands shook. What happens now? Hayes stood, pulling a folded warrant from his coat. Now I arrest Marshal Garrett and every man who rode with him. Deputy Turner will assist. You and your brother will stay here under guard until it is done. Willa rose slowly. How long? Hayes met her eyes. A few hours. Maybe less. Garrett does not know I am here yet. We will move fast. Willa nodded, numb. Micah stepped forward. I will make sure she is safe. Hayes glanced between them, something knowing in his expression. I am sure you will, Deputy. He headed for the door, pausing on the threshold. Miss Sinclair, you did a brave thing today. Your father would be proud. Then he was gone. Willa sank back into the chair, shaking. Ethan sat beside her. Micah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the street through the window. An hour crawled past. Then shouts erupted outside. Gunfire cracked, sharp and close. Ethan jumped. Micah moved to the door, hand on his gun. Stay here. Willa stood. What is happening? Micah's jaw was tight. Hayes is making his move. More shouts. Running boots. A scuffle. Then silence. Long, terrible silence. Micah opened the door cautiously, stepped outside. Willa and Ethan followed, unable to stay inside any longer. The street was full of men. Hayes stood in the center, Garrett in front of him in irons, his face purple with rage. 4 other men were cuffed beside him, including the 2 Micah had arrested the night before. Townspeople gathered, whispering, staring. Garrett's gaze found Willa across the crowd, and his expression twisted with hate. You, he spat. You did this. Willa lifted her chin, her voice steady. No, Marshal. You did this. Hayes yanked Garrett toward a waiting wagon. The territorial judge will see you hang Garrett. Take comfort in that. Garrett struggled, cursing, but Hayes shoved him into the wagon with the others. The crowd murmured, shocked, fascinated. Willa felt Micah's presence at her shoulder, solid and grounding. It is over. Willa turned to him, her eyes burning. Is it? Micah nodded. Hayes will take them to Silver Falls for trial. Your testimony is on record. Garrett's accounts are frozen. The foreclosure is void. You won your ranch back, Miss Sinclair. Willa's knees buckled. Micah caught her, his arm around her waist, holding her up. Easy. Breathe. Willa pressed her face into his shoulder, shaking with relief and exhaustion, and something deeper. We did it. Micah's voice was rough. You did it. I just helped. Willa pulled back, looked up into his face. You saved my life. Micah's gaze was soft, unguarded. You saved mine first. You gave me a reason to finish this fight. Willa's throat ached. So what happens now, Deputy? Micah hesitated, his hand still on her waist. Hayes will want a full report. The trial will take a few weeks. After that, he paused, his voice dropping. After that, my assignment here is done. Willa's chest tightened. You are leaving. Micah's jaw worked. That was always the plan, Miss Sinclair. I am not the staying kind. Remember? Willa stepped back, forcing herself to breathe. Right. Of course. You have a job. Other towns. Other corrupt marshals. Micah looked away. Something like that. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, the cold settling in despite the morning sun. Then I guess this is goodbye. Micah's head snapped up. Not yet. The trial, remember? I will be here until then. Willa nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned and walked back toward the church, Ethan following. She did not look back. She could not. If she looked back, she would beg Micah Turner to stay, and that was not fair to either of them. He had done what he promised. He had saved her ranch. That had to be enough, even if it felt like losing everything that mattered. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, quiet blur. Willa returned to the ranch, repaired what the storm and Garrett's men had damaged, worked the land with Ethan, and tried not to think about the deputy who had promised to leave. Micah came by twice, delivering updates on the trial, checking to make sure she was safe. Both times, Willa kept the conversations short, polite, distant. She could not afford to let herself hope. On the third Sunday after Garrett's arrest, Willa went to church alone. Ethan had stayed home to finish the fence repairs. She sat in the back pew, listening to Reverend Matthews preach about forgiveness and new beginnings, and felt the weight of the past weeks pressing down on her. When the service ended, she stepped outside into the bright afternoon and found Micah waiting by the steps. He was dressed for travel, duster brushed clean, saddlebags packed on his horse. Willa's heart cracked. "You are leaving?" Micah nodded slowly. "Trial ended yesterday. Garrett and his men will hang next month. Hayes does not need me anymore." Willa forced a smile. "Then congratulations, Deputy. You finished what you came to do." Micah stepped closer. "I wanted to say goodbye. Properly." Willa looked up at him, her eyes stinging. "Goodbye, then. And thank you. For everything." Micah was silent, his gaze searching her face. "That is it? Just thank you? And goodbye?" Willa's voice broke. "What else do you want me to say, Deputy? You told me from the start you were not the staying kind. I believed you. I prepared for this. So go. Ride out. Find your next job. I will be fine." Micah's jaw tightened. "Will you?" Willa lifted her chin, tears burning behind her eyes. "I have been fine for 3 years. I will manage." Micah reached out, caught her hand. His voice was rough. "What if I do not want you to just manage? What if I want you to be happy? What if I want—" He stopped, his throat working. Willa stared at him, her pulse pounding. "Want what, Micah?" Micah pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "What if I want to stay?" Willa's breath caught. "You do not mean that." Micah's thumb brushed her cheek, his gaze locked on hers. "I have been riding from town to town for 2 years, chasing men like Garrett, telling myself I was doing good work. And I was. But it was lonely, and it was empty. And then I met you. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I wanted something more than the next job. I wanted a home. I wanted a future. I wanted you." Willa's tears spilled over. "You are leaving." Micah shook his head slowly. "Not if you ask me to stay." Willa's chest ached. Hope and fear tangled so tight she could not breathe. "I cannot ask you that. You have a life, a career." Micah's hand tightened on hers. "I have a job. That is not the same as a life. And I am tired, Willa. I am tired of running. I am tired of being alone. I want to wake up in the same place every morning. I want to build something that lasts. And I want to do it with you. if you will have me." Willa stared up at him, her heart breaking open. "You mean it? You really mean it?" Micah's smile was soft, uncertain, hopeful. "I mean it. I love you, Willa Sinclair. I think I have loved you since the moment you let me into your house during that storm and trusted me when you had no reason to. I know it is fast. I know it is crazy. But I also know I do not want to ride away from you. Not now. Not ever." Willa's hands came up to frame his face, her tears falling freely now. "I love you too. God help me. I tried not to. But I do. And if you stay, if you really stay, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Micah's smile broke wide and real. "Then I am staying." Willa laughed, a sound caught between a sob and joy. "You are staying." Micah pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I am staying." And then he kissed her. The kiss was gentle, certain, full of promise. Willa leaned into it, into him, and felt the last of her fear dissolve. When they finally pulled apart, Micah was smiling, his eyes bright. "So what now?" Willa smiled back, her heart light for the first time in years. "Now we go home. You help me run the ranch. We build a life. Together." Micah's thumb traced her jaw. "That sounds perfect." Willa took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "There is one thing, though." Micah raised an eyebrow. "What?" Willa's smile turned mischievous. "You are going to have to learn how to keep books. I am not doing all the work myself." Micah laughed, the sound warm and free. "Deal. As long as you teach me." Willa pulled him down the steps toward his horse. "Come on, deputy. Let us go home." Micah untied his horse, swung into the saddle, and reached down to pull Willa up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressed her cheek to his back, and felt the steady beat of his heart. They rode out of town together, past the general store, past the saloon, past the places where Garrett had ruled with fear and cruelty. Now those places were just buildings, ordinary and small, because the man who had given them power was gone, and the people who had survived him were free. Willa and Micah rode toward Juniper Ranch, toward the home she had fought so hard to keep, toward the future they would build together. The sun was warm on their backs, the sky wide and blue, the land open and waiting. And for the first time since her father died, Willa felt hope settle into her bones, solid and real. She had her ranch. She had her brother. And she had Micah Turner, the deputy who had stayed when he could have run, who had fought for her when no one else would, who had chosen her above everything else. That was enough. That was everything. They reached the ranch as the afternoon light turned golden. Ethan looked up from the fence line, saw them riding double, and grinned. "About time," he called. Micah dismounted, helped Willa down, and held her hand as they walked toward the house. Willa looked at the weathered boards, the patched roof, the land her father had loved, and felt the weight of the past lift. This was home, and now it always would be. Micah squeezed her hand. "You all right?" Willa smiled up at him. "I am better than all right. I am happy." Micah's answering smile was soft, full of wonder. "Me too." And then he kissed her again, right there in the yard, with the sun setting and Ethan pretending not to watch, and Willa kissed him back with everything she had. The months that followed were full of hard work, laughter, and the slow, steady building of a life. Micah took off the deputy star and became a rancher. He learned to keep books under Willa's patient instruction and discovered he had a knack for training horses. Ethan grew into a man, confident and capable, no longer carrying the weight of the ranch alone. They hired back the hands Willa had let go, repaired the barn, expanded the herd. Juniper Ranch began to thrive again. In the evenings, Willa and Micah sat on the porch and watched the sun go down over the hills, their hands linked, their shoulders touching. They talked about the future, about adding a room to the house, about buying the adjoining property, about the family they might have someday. And sometimes they did not talk at all, just sat in the comfortable silence of two people who had found home in each other. Willa never forgot the night Micah rode into the storm to warn her. She never forgot the danger, the fear, the desperate gamble that had brought them together. But she did not live in the past. She lived in the present, in the warmth of Micah's hand in hers, in the sound of his laughter, in the quiet joy of waking up every morning beside the man who had chosen her above everything else. 1 year to the day after Garrett's arrest, Micah and Willa were married in the little church in Cedar Creek. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. Mrs. Kowalski cried. Ethan stood as witness, grinning the whole time. And when Micah kissed his bride, the whole town cheered. Willa wore her mother's dress, cream-colored and simple, with wildflowers in her hair. Micah wore a new coat, dark and sober, and the look in his eyes when he saw her walking down the aisle took her breath away. After the ceremony, there was supper and dancing, just like the night they had first danced together. But this time, there was no fear, no hidden danger, no marshal watching from the shadows. This time, it was just celebration, pure and joyful. Micah pulled Willa close as the fiddler played, his hand warm on her waist. "Happy, Mrs. Turner?" Willa smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." Micah's expression softened. "Me too. I never thought I would have this. A home, a family, you." Willa's eyes stung. "You have all of it now. For as long as you want it." Micah's voice was rough. "I want it forever." Willa rose on her toes, kissed him softly. "Then forever it is." They danced until the lanterns burned low and the guests began to drift home. Then Micah took Willa's hand and led her outside into the cool night air. The stars were bright overhead, scattered thick across the black sky. They walked slowly back to the ranch, the wagon creaking behind them, Ethan driving and pretending to give them privacy. When they reached home, Micah lifted Willa down from the wagon, held her close for a moment, and then carried her over the threshold. Ethan whistled and hollered. Willa laughed, her arms around Micah's neck. "You do not have to carry me, you know." Micah grinned. "I know. But I want to." Willa kissed his jaw. "Then carry away, Mr. Turner." Micah carried her inside, kicked the door shut, and set her down gently in the quiet house. The lamps were lit, the fire banked low, everything warm and waiting. Micah framed her face with his hands, his gaze serious. "Now. I love you, Willa. Every day for the rest of my life I am going to make sure you know that." Willa's throat tightened. "I love you too, Micah. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Micah smiled, soft and certain. No. We are the best thing that ever happened to each other. And then he kissed her, slow and deep, and Willa let herself fall into it. Into him, into the life they had fought so hard to build. Outside, the wind whispered through the prairie grass. Inside, the house was warm, full of love and promise, and the quiet certainty of a future they would face together. Willa Sinclair Turner had her ranch. She had her family. And she had Micah, the man who had ridden into her life during a storm and stayed through every trial that followed. She had fought for all of it, and she had won. Not because she was fearless, not because it was easy, but because she had chosen to trust, to risk, to love. And in the end, that had made all the difference. The next morning, Willa woke in Micah's arms, sunlight streaming through the window, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen where Ethan was already up and working. She turned her head, found Micah watching her, his expression soft and content. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner." Willa smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Turner." Micah brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Ready to start the rest of our lives?" Willa's heart swelled. Absolutely. They rose together, dressed, and walked out into the bright morning. The ranch stretched around them, solid and real, theirs in every way that mattered. And as they stood on the porch, hands linked, looking out over the land they would work together, Willa felt peace settle deep in her soul. This was home. This was love. This was everything.